Somewhere in the dark, beyond the places most travelers ever see, there is a world built around memory. A ring, enormous and patient, turning through the quiet. And on that ring, or beneath its light, are the remains of a civilization so old in Halo that even its ruins feel like architecture from a dream. The Forerunners did not simply build things. They arranged distance, silence, and purpose into shapes that still look solemn long after their makers are gone. It is easy to picture those places as empty, but empty is not quite the right word. They are full of signs, full of surfaces that still hold a little light, full of corridors that remember footsteps no one can hear anymore, full of controls and glyphs and chambers that seem to wait with endless patience. In Halo, the ancient world does not shout. It rests, it lingers. And that lingering is part of the comfort of it, the way a vast ruin can make the imagination slow down and breathe more evenly. The Forerunners belong to a kind of ancient future, a civilization that feels at once ceremonial and technological, severe and graceful. Their work stretches across the stars, yet it often carries the feeling of carved stone. Their buildings may be made of advanced materials, but they are shaped with a kind of visual logic that recalls temples, vaults, and buried halls. Tall ribs, sweeping curves, repeated patterns, great blank expanses interrupted by luminous lines. It is a style that seems designed not only to function but to be remembered, and perhaps that is one of the most interesting things about them. So many civilizations build for comfort or defense or display. The Forerunners seem to have built for continuity. Their structures are full of the feeling that something must remain after everything else has changed. That is why their ruins feel so calm. They are not the remains of a hurried collapse. They are the remains of a long intention interrupted. If you imagine walking through one of their surviving spaces, you might notice how little clutter there is. The floors are smooth, the passages are measured, even the lighting, where it still works, seems restrained. A Forerunner space does not need to prove itself. It simply exists, and in existing it creates a kind of quiet pressure, a sense that you are in the presence of scale older than your own ideas of scale. It is the same feeling one sometimes gets in a great cathedral, or at the foot of a mountain, or standing inside a desert wind that has been moving for centuries. Halo itself is part of that feeling. The ring world is not just a setting, it is an atmosphere, a vast arc of land and sky, a world that curves in ways the eye does not immediately forgive. If a person were to stand in some open place on one of those rings, they might catch sight of the horizon bending softly, and that would be enough to remind them that this is not a planet in the usual sense. It is an artifact of civilization at its most ambitious, a world made by hands that wanted to shape the life of entire systems. There is something restful in that kind of construction, strangely enough, not because it is small, but because it is ordered. The ring offers a horizon that has been chosen. It gives the impression that nature and engineering have agreed to share the same space, at least for a while. Forests, plains, and lakes sit under artificial skies, and the result is not loud or frantic. It is composed. It feels like a thought held very carefully. The ancient history of Halo is also full of absence, and absence can be gentle when it is treated with care. The Forerunners are often more visible in what they left than in what they explained. You find the devices, the vaults, the monitors, the great installations, but the motives behind them arrive in fragments, as though a vast archive were written in a language with many missing pages. That incompleteness gives the world room to breathe. There is always a little more to wonder about, a little more to circle around quietly. A civilization that advanced would likely have had ordinary days as well, of course, though the word ordinary may not fit them very well. Perhaps there were custodians who checked systems in immense silent chambers. Perhaps there were scholars reading maps of stars. Perhaps there were engineers walking along luminous platforms where the floor seemed to glow under their feet. It is easy to imagine procedures, rituals, maintenance cycles, the daily business that keeps a vast society from drifting apart. Even the greatest empires and most advanced cultures depend on repetition, on 1,000 small acts done with patience. In that sense, the Forerunners feel familiar in a calm way. They remind us that no civilization is made only of monuments. It is also made of habits. Someone must have prepared rooms. Someone must have adjusted readings. Someone must have watched over archives or tuned machines or stood quietly near a control chamber while nothing dramatic happened at all. Those are the kinds of details that make ancient worlds feel lived in, not merely designed. Halo often leaves us with traces rather than complete narratives. A fragment of text, a sealed chamber, a weapon that remembers its purpose. A ring that carries the marks of decisions made on a scale almost too large to hold in the mind. The Forerunners in particular are often felt as a civilization that preferred systems to stories, or perhaps believed the system itself would become the story after enough time passed. That is a very old kind of hope, and also a very old kind of sadness. There is a mood in this history that resembles evening light on stone. Not dramatic, not severe in a loud way, but softened by distance. The more ancient the architecture becomes, the more it seems to invite quiet. You do not hurry through it. You slow your steps. You notice how corners are joined, how symbols repeat, how an entire wall can be devoted to a pattern no one alive fully understands. That patience, that attention, is part of the pleasure of wandering through Halo's oldest places. And then there are the halos themselves, these immense constructs that feel at first like landscapes and then, only later, like instruments. They are rings, yes, but they are also fields, waters, ecosystems, archives, and weapons in the broadest possible sense. Their size is difficult to picture, so the mind does what it always does with the difficult and turns it into a sequence of simpler images. A lake, a road, a forest, a structure that goes on and on beyond the visible edge, and perhaps that is enough for a sleepy imagination to rest inside. One of the quieter pleasures of Halo lore is the sense of layered time. Human history, when it appears, feels comparatively brief. Then there are the older powers, the older makers, the older decisions that shaped what came later. This layering is comforting because it suggests that the present is never the first version of the world. There were earlier hands here, earlier questions, earlier attempts to solve problems that still have not gone away. Ruins remind us of that in the softest way possible. The Forerunners are often associated with responsibility, and responsibility can be a solemn kind of beauty. Their creations suggest an awareness that power needs structures, that knowledge needs storage, that extinction, if it arrives, should not arrive without resistance. There is a steady seriousness in that idea. It does not feel loud. It feels like a door closing gently. It feels like someone making sure the lights stay on a little longer for others who may one day arrive. That is why so much of Halo's ancient world has the feel of an unfinished conversation. The architecture says one thing, the artifacts suggest another. The surviving records complicate both. The listener or the player or the wanderer in imagination becomes a sort of patient visitor in a museum with no clear exit. Yet the mood is not anxious, it is almost meditative. Questions can be comfortable when they are held at a distance and allowed to be unanswered for a while. You can spend a long time thinking about the scale of the Forerunners without ever exhausting it. Their cities must have contained great public spaces, narrow service corridors, sealed laboratories, transport routes, vaults, gardens perhaps, and observation chambers with views over engineered horizons. There may have been places built specifically for solitude, for prayer, for study, for memory. There may have been halls in which the light changed slowly, marking the passage of artificial days. The exact details are often hidden, but the possibility of them is enough to give shape to the silence. Some ancient civilizations are remembered because they left monuments that still stand in familiar places, under real sun and real wind. The Forerunners are remembered through a different kind of endurance. Their monuments are embedded in a fictional cosmos, yet they feel just as weighty. They are the kind of ruins that make the imagination lean in, a hidden chamber on a remote installation, a sealed archive beneath a broken floor, a machine interface with inscriptions like a half-finished prayer. These details create a historical mood without needing to explain themselves all at once, and maybe that is part of the bedtime comfort. The mind is given enough to wander, but not so much that it must hurry. It can drift from one fragment to another, a corridor, a monitor, a horizon line, a vast green valley inside an artificial world, a temple-like structure standing in pale light. Each image is self-contained. Each one can hold the attention for a moment and then release it gently. The older civilizations of Halo also invite a certain kind of awe because they are never just ancient. They are ancient and advanced, ancient and engineered, ancient and still active in places. That combination creates a slow, pleasant strangeness. A bridge built by an absent people still spans a valley. A console still answers to someone somewhere, even if the original language has faded. A ring still rotates. The universe keeps its balance through systems that outlast the individuals who made them. That is true in many histories, even the real ones. We often remember the kings and the generals, but the ordinary maintenance of civilization matters just as much. The same is true here. The more one thinks about the Forerunners, the more one imagines the invisible labor behind the grandeur. There must have been schedules, there must have been inspections. There must have been archives with labels and copies and backups. Civilization is not only the dramatic moment, it is the careful repetition that makes the dramatic moment possible. Sometimes the ancient world of Halo feels almost monastic in its restraint, not because it is simple, but because it is controlled. The surfaces are deliberate. The spaces are large enough to humble the body. The systems appear to answer to rules that are older than the people standing in them. That kind of environment can be soothing to imagine. It offers the mind a structure to lean on, a great corridor with evenly spaced lights, a chamber where the ceiling is too high to see clearly, a still platform above a silent shaft of unknown depth. And if one drifts a little deeper into the lore, the mood grows even quieter. The Forerunners are tied to choices that shaped entire eras, and yet their own end is itself a kind of hush. They leave behind tools, records, and warnings. They become less like a vanished empire and more like a set of instructions found after the house has gone still. Such stories always carry a tender melancholy, not the kind that overwhelms, but the kind that settles softly in the background like dusk in a long room. What remains after a civilization ends is often a mixture of utility and ceremony. In Halo, that mixture is everywhere. Devices built to serve larger plans, monuments that also function as machines. Spaces that look sacred and practical at the same time. This blending makes the world feel lived in by minds very unlike our own, and yet not entirely unlike ours. Even our own ancient monuments often began with both need and meaning, with both engineering and reverence. Perhaps that is why we keep returning to lost civilizations in stories. They allow us to picture intelligence at a distance, but also intimacy. We imagine people making choices in rooms now empty. We imagine their voices echoing once where there is only wind. In the Forerunner world, this imagination has room to move because the setting is so vast and so careful. The scale does not crush the small details, it protects them. There are, of course, other ancient powers in Halo's wider history, other species and other long arcs of development, each with their own lost chapters. But the Forerunners remain the most immediate presence in the ruins, the most visible memory pressed into the structure of the setting itself. Their legacy is architectural. Their legacy is biological. Their legacy is philosophical. It is the sort of legacy that touches everything without asking permission. And that is a fascinating thing to contemplate in a sleepy, unhurried way. Some civilizations want to be remembered through statues, others through laws, others through songs. The Forerunners seem to have wanted to be remembered through systems that kept working. There is dignity in that and also a certain distance. A system can outlast grief. A structure can outlast names. A ring can continue turning after everyone who knew why it was built has faded away. Still, there is warmth to be found in the imagining. One can picture a quiet chamber lit by pale panels, where a Forerunner scholar pauses over a display of star maps. One can picture a maintenance crew moving through a colossal tunnel, their steps small against the geometry. One can picture archives in which some records were meant to survive catastrophe, carefully sealed away like seeds. These scenes are calm because they are purposeful. They suggest a civilization that believed the future deserved preparation. There is also the almost soothing perfection of some Forerunner surfaces. Smooth metal-like walls, clean lines, luminous inlays, spaces that look as if they have been polished by centuries of intention. Even when a ruin is damaged, the damage often reveals structure rather than chaos. Broken edges remain elegant. Collapsed corridors still hint at order. It is the visual equivalent of a deep breath. The older a fictional world becomes, the more it invites us to slow down and admire its internal weather. Halo's ancient civilizations have a kind of weather made of scale, silence, and continuity. A place can feel sunlit and ancient at once. A chamber can feel sealed and open to the imagination at the same time. A ruin can be lonely without being frightening. These are gentle paradoxes, and they are pleasant to rest inside. If you listen long enough, you may start to notice how often the law returns to preservation. Preserving knowledge, preserving species, preserving evidence, preserving structures, preserving warnings. That idea sits at the heart of many older stories, both real and imagined, and it has a calming shape. Someone cared enough to keep something from vanishing completely. Even when the effort failed in part, the intention remains. Intentions are among the quietest forms of survival. And perhaps that is the truest way to think about Halo's ancient civilizations. Not as a pile of dead facts and not as a puzzle that must be solved immediately, but as a landscape of intentions. Great intentions, small intentions, practical intentions, ceremonial intentions. A world built by beings who expected time to continue and who tried in their own way to arrange time into something lasting. The ruins we see are only the visible edge of that effort. It is restful to consider that effort without needing a conclusion. The ring can keep turning. The old halls can remain dim and orderly. The archives can stay sealed for a little longer. The monoliths can stand under blue shadow while dust drifts slowly through the light. In a universe so full of movement, the ancient world offers a place to pause, not to stop forever, only to rest. And so the imagination walks on quietly, from chamber to chamber, from platform to platform, from one fragment of memory to another. The Forerunners remain distant but not cold. Their world remains vast but not harsh. It is a civilization remembered through architecture, through silence, through the shape of what was left behind. That is enough for tonight and perhaps for many nights. There is no need to hurry past the ruins. They will still be there, glowing faintly in the dark, waiting with their patient, ancient calm. Beyond the first ringworlds, the history of Halo opens into many layers that feel almost like shelves in a great archive. On one shelf there are records of construction, engineering, and maintenance. On another there are the stories of conflict, alliance, collapse, and recovery. On another still there are the quieter questions, the ones with no firm answer yet. Why did one civilization choose this shape over that shape? Why did a warning remain active so long? Why did certain places stay sealed? These questions do not need urgency to be interesting. They can simply sit nearby like stones in warm grass. The Forerunners, for all their vastness, are often remembered through artifacts that feel intimate when examined closely. A panel with grooves worn by use, a light that shifts in response to presence, a chamber that opens only after a patient sequence of steps. These details make the ancient world feel tactile. One can almost imagine the temperature of the air inside these places, cool and still, with a faint metallic scent and the soft hush of systems operating far above or below the visible floor. And then there are the monitors, guardians of a sort, shaped by old purpose and long watchfulness. Their presence adds another layer to the atmosphere of Halo's ancient history. They are not merely machines. They are reminders that the Forerunner legacy was designed to continue speaking after its makers were gone. A very old archive might be silent until someone arrives with the right key. A sealed environment might remain unchanged for ages. In this way, the setting feels less like a ruin and more like a message left in a patient hand. The idea of messages surviving across immense spans of time has a special quiet charm. In real life, we preserve pottery fragments, inscriptions, tomb paintings, and old structures because we understand that time is selective. Some things vanish quickly, others remain. The world of Halo takes that truth and stretches it outward into the stars. A civilization can disappear, and still its intentions remain encoded in architecture, in terrain, in machines that were designed to last longer than memory. There is comfort in such continuity. Even when the details are incomplete, the pattern is there. A system once created can continue speaking in its own careful language. The language may not be fully understood, but the tone is often clear enough. It says, "This mattered. This was built to endure. This was made with expectation." That kind of statement is soothing in its own way because it places the listener inside a chain of care. Not all ancient worlds in fiction feel this way. Some are loud with decay, full of rubble and dramatic collapse. Halo's older civilizations often feel more formal than that, more composed. Even failure in their case seems to have been organized. That can be strangely restful to think about. Catastrophe is less frightening when the remains are arranged with a sense of purpose. A broken cathedral still points upward. A ruined bridge still marks a crossing. A shattered archive still hints at a mind that once tried to hold the world together. The Forerunners also inspire curiosity because their scale invites comparison and then defeats it. A building on a normal world can be measured, a city can be crossed, a ruin can be mapped, but a ringworld or a monumental installation resists complete mental containment. The mind can only take one quiet portion at a time. A field here, a corridor there, a lake under an artificial sky. A tower seen from far away. This piecemeal way of knowing is not frustrating in a bedtime context. It is gentle. It keeps the imagination from working too hard. There is, too, the matter of the ancient biological and ecological choices surrounding the Halo installations. Worlds are not only built from metal and stone, they are also built from soil, water, air, and living systems that can unfold over time. The Forerunners' work therefore feels less like simple construction and more like orchestration. They did not just make structures, they curated environments. They designed conditions under which life could move, adapt, and persist. That is a very old and very human desire, even if the scale here is far beyond human hands. When one thinks about lost civilizations, one often imagines the monuments first. But daily life is what gives the monuments their meaning. What did someone eat before a shift in a great hall? Where did they rest? How were their records arranged? What did a typical walkway sound like beneath their feet? In the Forerunner age, these small scenes are mostly left to the imagination, and that is part of the pleasure. The mind may borrow familiar things like long robes, careful routines, softly lit rooms, and schedules marked by luminous displays. A civilization as advanced as the Forerunners would likely have had customs that seemed simple to them and extraordinary to us. Perhaps certain halls were entered only after a pause. Perhaps some data vaults required ritualized sequences not because they were magical, but because the form of caution itself became ceremonial over time. Often, the line between functional habit and tradition grows thin in long-lived societies. Repeated actions become meaningful simply because they are repeated with care. The ancient world of Halo, then, is full of such preserved habits. In a way, the lore itself behaves like an archive. It gives us enough to sense a shape, enough to imagine a civilization of immense scope, and enough gaps to keep the imagination awake in a gentle way. That balance is ideal for a bedtime story. There is substance but no strain. There is depth but no demand. The listener can come and go, catching a reflection here, a corridor there, a half-remembered star map drifting by. One of the most tranquil images in this entire setting is the ring at night. Even though the ring is not a planet, it can still carry weather, shadow, and moon-like light across its surface. One can imagine forests darkening slowly, lakes becoming silver, and ancient structures catching pale highlights along their edges. In those moments, the Forerunner world feels almost ceremonial, as if the architecture itself were participating in the evening. It is an old place, but it is not asleep. It is simply waiting. Waiting is a powerful idea in science fiction, especially when it is peaceful. A sealed chamber waits. A dormant machine waits. An archive waits for the right reader. A ring waits for its orbit to carry it into another kind of dawn. This waiting creates the soft suspense of potential rather than danger. Nothing is rushing. Everything has time. And because the world has time, the listener feels time slowing too. The beauty of Halo's ancient civilizations lies partly in their incompleteness. If every answer were given at once, the world would lose a bit of its hush. Instead, it remains open, like a door that does not quite close. We are left with impressions, a monument against a dim sky, a vast hallway with repeating lights, a chamber where the air feels older than the visitor, a civilization that built with enough confidence to assume its works might outlive it, and enough humility to know that even that might not be enough. There is an almost literary elegance to that. The Forerunners seem to have lived at the intersection of ambition and sorrow. They reached extremely far, and in reaching so far they built systems that later generations could only partially understand. That partial understanding is not failure. It is the condition of all who come after. We inherit the world in fragments, then slowly arrange those fragments into stories we can carry. And because this is Halo, there is always more beyond the immediate fragment. Beyond one ruin lies another. Beyond one archive lies a deeper one. Beyond one installation lies the enormous geometry of the ring itself. Beyond one era lies another. The setting is almost naturally recursive, as if each answer opens into a larger room. That can feel wonderfully calming. The mind is never trapped in a single conclusion. It is always allowed another quiet chamber. Even the names in Halo's ancient history have a kind of polished gravity. They sound like titles from a lost administration or labels from a sacred machine. Some names feel like places, others like roles, others like functions remembered imperfectly. The effect is subtle but important. Naming in a fictional ancient world creates the impression of order, and order is one of the softest comforts available to the tired imagination. As the lore continues to unfold in memory, we can imagine an old control room with broad windows overlooking a constructed landscape. We can imagine a long bridge crossing a void lit by distant indicators. We can imagine storage vaults where dormant knowledge rests in layered formats waiting. We can imagine an isolated outpost standing above a field of quiet metal grass, if such a thing could exist, or a research chamber deep beneath a smooth shell of ancient material. Each image remains self-contained, like a small room in a very large house. The house in this metaphor is the Halo universe itself, and the ancient civilizations are the oldest rooms. Their doors are heavy, their surfaces are clean. Their corners are full of softened shadows. They are not empty exactly. They are occupied by the memory of use. That memory is often enough to make a place feel inhabited in the imagination. A place that remembers its purpose is never entirely vacant. If one lingers with that idea, more quiet associations begin to gather. Libraries, tombs, laboratories, temples, observatories, fortresses. All these human structures share something with Halo's Forerunner architecture, even when the materials differ. They are all attempts to give thought a durable shape. They all imply that what we know should not vanish immediately, and that perhaps is why ancient ruins are so moving. They are thought made visible after the thinker has gone. For bedtime listening, there is a particular kindness in stories like this, where the subject is grand but the pace is low. The mind can drift through ancient halls without needing to solve them. It can stand on a ringworld horizon and simply notice the curve. It can enter a sealed chamber and admire the silence. It can look up at a luminous ceiling and accept that the builders of this place are gone while their work remains. The emotional temperature stays even, curious, reflective, softly held, and somewhere in that softness, the theme of civilization itself becomes more noticeable. Every civilization, whether real or imagined, is a negotiation with time. It is a way of saying that the present matters enough to be organized, recorded, and handed forward. The Forerunners took that to an extreme that feels mythic and technological at once. Their world was meant to endure. Their architecture still performs endurance. Their ruins still teach the eye how to be quiet. Perhaps that is enough to carry into sleep. Not a final answer, but a calm pattern. Rings turning, halls waiting, archives sealed, lights fading in long corridors. The ancient world of Halo remains there not as a threat, but as a vast, orderly silence. And in that silence, the imagination can rest, wandering slowly, noticing only what it wants, and leaving the rest for another night. The oldest spaces in Halo often feel designed for long contemplation, even when they were built for some other purpose entirely. A platform may appear too large for a single visitor. A bridge may extend farther than a person could comfortably cross without pausing. A room may be so high and wide that voices seem to vanish before they reach the far wall. These proportions create a special kind of calm. They remind the body that it is small, and that being small is not a problem. It is simply the truth of the scale around us. The Forerunners understood scale in a way that most civilizations only glimpse from a distance. They built with the expectation that individual lives would move through vast systems. That can sound cold, but it does not have to be. A city built to outlast generations may still contain spaces of tenderness, spaces where light is carefully placed and paths are easy to follow. Even the most immense constructs can be hospitable if they are made with attention. In Halo, that attention is often visible in the clean geometry of the ruins. It is interesting how often ancient structures in fiction and history become beautiful through where rather than despite it. Dust softens edges, fractures reveal layers. Weather changes surfaces into maps of time. In the Forerunner spaces, this process feels especially noticeable because the original design was already so refined. A little decay does not ruin the feeling, it deepens it. The ruin becomes a collaboration between the original builders and the years that followed. This is one of the reasons the ancient Halo world suits a bedtime mood so well. It does not depend on noise or conflict to hold attention. Instead, it relies on shape, atmosphere, and continuity. The listener can pause on any one detail: a distant tower, a glowing archive, a silent transport corridor, a field of artificial grass bending under a faint wind. Each of these can be enough for a moment. Each can rest in the mind without demanding anything more. There is also a certain solace in imagining the Forerunners as caretakers of immense systems. Caretaking is an underappreciated form of greatness. It lacks the drama of conquest, but it carries an endurance that conquest usually does not. To maintain a structure across centuries, to keep records legible, to preserve pathways, to manage the delicate balance of a constructed world, these are tasks that require patience and respect. They are the kind of tasks that quietly shape history. And though Halo's history is fictional, the feeling it creates is very real. The sense of standing near the remnants of an intelligence larger than the present moment. The sense that a world can hold layers of old purpose beneath current life. The sense that even faraway civilizations leave behind habits in stone, metal, and light. These feelings have always accompanied our fascination with antiquity. Halo simply gives them a cosmic scale. That cosmic scale is easier to absorb when it arrives in fragments. A wall here, a relic there, a name spoken softly. A sequence of lights in a sealed corridor. The mind does not need to carry the whole universe at once. It only needs to follow the next quiet shape. And in following those shapes, it drifts naturally toward a slower rhythm. We might imagine a historian in this world, or an archivist, standing before a set of recovered records and tracing patterns across them. We might imagine a technician studying a dormant mechanism and gently brushing away dust. We might imagine a traveler arriving at a ruin at dusk when the air is cool and the stone or metal glows faintly with the last light of the day. These are not dramatic scenes, they are attentive ones. They reward stillness. The Forerunner legacy, for all its complexity, ultimately contributes to a simple emotional result. It makes the universe feel older than the stories told inside it. That is a powerful effect. A story becomes more immersive when it suggests that it is only one layer of a much larger fabric. The listener senses depth beneath depth, and the result is not anxiety but wonder. Wonder is a soft companion for the end of the day. So let the ancient world remain vast. Let the ring arc slowly across the dark. Let the ruins keep their luminous outlines. Let the corridors stretch into quiet distance. Let the archives wait. Let the old names sit in the air like polished stones. There is no need to solve everything tonight. It is enough to remember that somewhere in the forgotten world of Halo's ancient civilizations, the past still rests in elegant forms, and the silence around it is kind. And if sleep begins to arrive while these images are still moving softly through the mind, then that is fitting too. A ring world under blue haze, a monolith in moonlight, a sealed hall with patient lights, a civilization that built for what might come after it. These are quiet things to carry across the edge of waking, and they can fade just as gently as they appeared. The last thought can be small, a door left closed but not locked, a light still glowing in the distance, a path through ancient stone or ancient metal, waiting for no one in particular. The world remains calm and immense, and the listener can rest beside it for as long as needed. Beyond that final image, there is still more to wander through, if only in a slow and unhurried way. The ancient history of Halo does not end at a single ruin, and it does not narrow itself to one archive or one vanished city. It spreads outward into entire ages of design, preparation, and uncertainty. It includes the long quiet of worlds made and then left behind. It includes the habits of people who believed the future could be shaped by careful hands. And it includes the strange tenderness of machines that continue to wait long after their creators are gone. There is something almost monastic in the way the Forerunners are often imagined. Not simple monks and not peaceful in the ordinary sense, but beings whose existence was bound to obligation, scale, and memory. Their works suggest a civilization that regarded time as something to be managed, arranged, and interpreted. They did not merely build, they catalogued, they preserved, they sealed. They left instructions for lives they would never live to see. That sense of deferred intention gives their ruins a particular hush. It is the hush of a place made for others. In many old civilizations, real and imagined, there is always this same unsettling and beautiful idea. Someone once stood here and thought ahead. Someone mapped a corridor, aligned a doorway, or carved a symbol into a wall with the belief that the mark would outlast the hand that made it. The Forerunners embody that instinct in an amplified form. Their structures are not only durable, they are devotional in their precision. Even a simple landing platform can feel like a ritual object, as though geometry itself were part of their language. And then there is the question of scale. Halo's ancient places often feel too large for the present to fully inhabit. Their chambers open into high vaults. Their walkways span impossible distances. Their surfaces reflect light in clean, measured ways that make the air seem thin and formal. This is one of the quiet pleasures of the setting, the sensation that the architecture is not merely sheltering bodies, but expressing a philosophy. The halls are not just functional, they are composed. The older the civilization feels, the more room it makes for silence. That is true of so many ruins. A broken temple on a cliff can feel more alive than a crowded market because it allows the mind to hear the absence around it. In Halo, that absence is often filled by a faint hum, a distant pulse, or a glow that has not entirely surrendered to time. These little signs of lingering energy make the ruins feel cared for, even when no one is there. It is as if the civilization has not vanished so much as stepped beyond the edge of immediate perception. This is one reason the ancient elements of Halo lend themselves so well to bedtime reflection. They do not insist upon urgency. They are not asking to be solved in the moment. They ask only to be noticed. A segment of wall etched with unfamiliar lines, a chamber whose proportions imply a purpose no longer remembered, a floating panel that still answers to commands no living hand has given in ages. Such details create a mood of patient inquiry, and patient inquiry is one of the gentlest forms of thought. It is worth lingering, too, on the idea of archives. Archives are deeply human, though every civilization invents them in its own way. They represent a wish to keep the past from dissolving entirely. Even when records are fragmented, damaged, or misread, their existence implies care. Somewhere, someone decided that memory mattered enough to organize. The Forerunners seem to have taken this impulse to extraordinary lengths. Their legacy includes not only monuments, but systems of preservation that feel almost reverent in their complexity. A quiet archive in a forgotten installation is a lovely image for this world. Tall chambers of dark glass or pale alloy, rows of sealed records, soft lighting that falls in thin bars across the floor, the air still and cool. Perhaps the only sound is a slow mechanical adjustment somewhere deep within the walls. In such a place, history does not feel loud. It feels layered. One can imagine centuries of information arranged in calm order, waiting for an interpreter who may never arrive. And that is one of the great mysteries of all ancient civilizations, whether in fiction or in fact. Why preserve so much and for whom? Sometimes the answer is practical, sometimes it is ceremonial, sometimes it is an act of faith. In the case of the Forerunners, the answer seems to combine all three. They built with the expectation that others would come later. They shaped reality around continuity. Their ruins, then, are not only remains. They are messages from a civilization that understood itself as part of a longer chain. There is a deep melancholy in that idea, but it is a measured melancholy, not a sorrow that overwhelms. The Forerunners do not appear as a civilization that failed because it lacked ambition. They failed because they had too much history to hold, too much duty to satisfy, and perhaps too little room for error. That makes them feel ancient in the most convincing way. Great civilizations often fall not because they are small, but because they are large enough to be burdened by their own complexity. The more systems they create, the more they must maintain. The more they preserve, the more they fear loss. And fear, even in a noble form, can become a kind of weather across an age. Still, there is no need to reduce them only to tragedy. Part of what makes the Forerunners memorable is the beauty of what they left behind. The graceful curve of a structure against a dark sky, the clean alignment of lights embedded in a hallway, the subtle elegance of a platform suspended above a vast, quiet expanse. These are not merely signs of power. They are signs of taste. They suggest a civilization that knew how to translate abstraction into environment and environment into feeling. That feeling can be similar to standing in a real ruin at a quiet hour. One notices the way ancient stone holds warmth from the day, or how a broken mosaic still reveals color in the cracks, or how the wind moves through an archway as if it remembers the shape of the building. The world of Halo, though fantastical, often evokes this same intimate sort of observation. Not just grand history, but the texture of history. Not just what was built, but how it feels to stand near what remains. The rings themselves are perhaps the most famous expression of this. Vast, controlled, enigmatic worlds circling through space with impossible calm. They are awe-inspiring, but they are also strangely serene. A ring is a boundary and a horizon at once. It suggests enclosure, but it also suggests order so immense that it has become its own kind of landscape. To imagine walking along one of these structures is to imagine living inside an artifact. The sky is not simply sky. It is the curve of intention. The ground is not merely ground. It is part of a designed cosmos, and there is something soothing in that design. even when the reasons behind it are difficult or grave. A well-ordered place can calm the mind. It offers a sense that chaos has been given shape. The Forerunners appear to have understood this deeply. Their constructions often feel like attempts to impose a tranquil grammar upon the vastness of space. Straight lines against the dark, arches against the void, layers of luminous geometry suspended over ancient worlds. The result is a civilization that feels both precise and dreamlike. As the mind drifts through these ideas, it may begin to imagine the labor behind them. Not as a spectacle, but as a steady, almost meditative process. Workers aligning panels, engineers monitoring systems, scholars recording functions and lineages, guardians maintaining boundaries. Even in a fictional setting, these details matter because they humanize scale. They remind us that every monumental structure is the end result of countless small attentions. Someone must have checked the measurements. Someone must have revised the records. Someone must have stood in a corridor and waited for a signal. That waiting is important. Ancient civilizations are often remembered for what they achieved, but they are equally shaped by what they anticipated. The waiting behind a project can stretch across generations. A temple might be begun by one ruler and completed by another. A vault might be sealed with the expectation that it will be opened in a distant era. A ringworld might be prepared not for present use, but for a future necessity no one wishes to face. This deferred posture gives the Forerunners a peculiar nobility. They do not live only for the moment. They live within a philosophy of inheritance. Inheritance in ancient history is never simple. It carries gifts and burdens together. Ruins are inherited as much as relics are. A successor civilization receives not only tools but questions. What was this for? Who made it? Why did they leave it? What were they trying to protect? Halo uses these questions beautifully. Its modern inhabitants move through structures that were never designed for them, and that mismatch creates both wonder and humility. To enter an older world is to realize how little one knows, and how much still waits beneath the surface. That sense of buried depth is one of the reasons lost civilizations are so endlessly compelling in myth and fiction. Atlantis, Lemuria, the vanished cities of old epics, the hidden temples in jungle stories, the buried libraries under desert sands, all of them express the same desire. We want to believe that history is larger than the official version. We want to think that beneath the visible world are older rooms, older names, older intelligence. Halo gives that desire a futuristic form, but the emotional shape is very old. It belongs to the same family as star maps, tombs, and forgotten scripts. Sometimes what draws us most is not the revelation, but the possibility of revelation. A sealed chamber is beautiful because it preserves uncertainty. An unread inscription is beautiful because it lets imagination work slowly. The Forerunner aesthetic understands this well. It often offers partial access rather than full explanation. A line of symbols, a fragment of a protocol, a chamber where an object has been removed but the pedestal remains. The mind naturally leans toward these absences. It fills them with hypotheses, and then, if one is tired enough, with dreams. Dreams are where ancient civilizations often become most gentle. In dreams, a ruined city can feel perfectly safe. A broken stair can lead to a soft-lit hall. A flooded chamber can hold no danger at all, only reflections. The same is true of bedtime thoughts. When the day loosens its grip, even enormous histories become approachable as atmosphere. One need not solve the fate of the Forerunners to appreciate the echo they left behind. One need only notice the weight of their silence. There is also an interesting contrast between their apparent technological mastery and the emotional quiet of their remains. Advanced civilizations in fiction are often depicted with relentless motion, flashing interfaces, urgent alarms, active defenses. Halo certainly contains such moments, but the broader impression of the ancient Forerunner world is calmer than that. Its deepest spaces seem designed for stillness. Their elegance comes from restraint. Even the grandeur is measured. It is the grandeur of a place that knows it has nothing to prove. This restraint makes the world more believable, strangely enough. Real old places are often understated in exactly this way. A weathered wall can be more moving than a polished monument because it no longer needs to announce itself. Its survival is enough. The Forerunner ruins possess that same confidence. They do not shout, they endure. Their shapes remain even when meaning has thinned, and that endurance becomes a kind of language. It says that something important happened here, though the full record may be gone. The missing record is, of course, part of the charm. No ancient world is complete in the minds of those who inherit it. There are always gaps, and the gaps are where mythology begins. A civilization loses its continuity, and later generations weave stories into the broken places. Some of those stories are accurate, others are not, but all of them testify to a refusal to let the past entirely disappear. The Forerunners, whether by intention or by the structure of their legacy, invite this myth-making. They are too vast to be contained by a single account. One can imagine, somewhere in this universe, a scholar tracing symbols by lantern light, comparing one inscription with another, trying to reconstruct a sequence of events long separated by catastrophe. One can imagine a field expedition standing at the edge of a buried plaza, pausing before descending a stair that disappears into shadow. One can imagine the careful, almost holy work of lifting dust from a panel that has not been read in ages. These acts are small, but they are how civilizations are rediscovered, not all at once, one patient gesture at a time, and because the Forerunner world is fictional, it can compress into it many of the feelings that attach themselves to real ancient history: the mystery of origin, the weight of scale, the elegance of forgotten design, the sorrow of collapse, the hope that something may still remain intact beneath damage. These are universal patterns. They cross from one imagined empire to another, from one excavation site to another, from one ruin to a ringworld circling in the dark. There is comfort, too, in the thought that not everything ancient is completely ruined. In Halo, some structures still function, some pathways still open, some lights still answer. This continuity suggests that the past is not always dead. Sometimes it is dormant. Sometimes it is waiting for a proper key, a proper sequence, a proper moment of return. The idea that an old world might still wake softly under the right conditions is deeply soothing. It turns archaeology into a form of listening. Listening is perhaps the best posture for thinking about the Forerunners late at night. One listens for the faint hiss of an old system. One listens for the echo in a vault. One listens for the unspoken logic of a civilization that valued order, memory, and survival in measure. And in that listening, the mind itself becomes quieter. It slows to match the pace of the imagined ruins. The breath deepens. The thoughts become less insistent. Even the more sorrowful aspects of this history can be held gently. Great civilizations often leave behind more than monuments. They leave behind caution. They leave behind examples of ambition that became too large to sustain. The Forerunners, with all their brilliance, stand as a reminder that scale alone does not guarantee permanence. Yet this reminder does not need to be grim. It can simply be part of the atmosphere, like the coolness of an evening hall after the sun has gone down. It is a fact of the world folded into the design. In many ways, the most moving part of ancient history is not the moment of creation, but the persistence of traces afterward. A broken road still pointing toward a vanished city, a ritual object found out of place, a wall built by hands that are now names in footnotes. In Halo, traces are everywhere. They are built into the setting's emotional structure. One moves through spaces that are never entirely empty because memory clings to them. Even when no person stands there, the place remains crowded with implication. That implication gives the quiet ruins a dignity of their own. They are not just leftovers, they are witnesses. They testify that another form of life once shaped the universe according to its own principles. They say that age can be translated into architecture, that memory can be embedded in geometry, and that even extinction does not always erase influence. There may be no grand ceremony left in the hall, but the hall itself remains ceremonial. The more one contemplates this, the more the Forerunners resemble all civilizations that become larger in retrospect than they ever were in motion. When a culture passes into legend, it gains polish. The rough edges fall away. The surviving structures and stories begin to appear inevitable, almost timeless. Halo plays with this process elegantly. The Forerunners are both historical and mythic. They are engineers but also ancestors of mystery. They are builders but also vanished custodians. That dual identity is what gives the ancient world its depth. And so the mind may continue, not in search of resolution but in the pleasure of reverie. A terrace above a dark basin, a bridge crossing a silent chamber, a circular hall where the ceiling disappears into shadow, a panel lit from within by a pale, patient glow, a garden of synthetic grasses under an artificial sky, a distant line of monolithic forms rising from a plain that has forgotten their names. These are not destinations so much as resting places for the imagination. In that sense, the Forerunner world behaves like a dream of history. It gathers together the kinds of things humans have always found moving in ruins and relics, and arranges them in a cosmic register. The dream is not about conquest. It is about continuity and loss, about the dignity of old work, about the beauty of forms that outlast their makers. And because it is a dream, it can be entered quietly. One does not need to arrive with certainty. One only needs to drift. Drifting, in the end, may be the best way to stand among the ancient Halo civilizations, to move slowly through their vanished courts, to pause at their thresholds, to glance upward at the shapes of structures that were meant to survive longer than any one life, to let the mind accept that not all histories are complete and that incompleteness can be beautiful. The shadows between records are not empty. They are part of the composition. So the ring world turns, if only in thought. The old systems remain patient. The ruins keep their calm geometry. The archived voices, if any still linger, speak in low and distant tones that do not disturb the night. The ancient civilization is gone, and yet not gone, because its forms still arrange the air of imagination. It stands in fragments, in echoes, in luminous remnants, and in that state it becomes even easier to rest beside. And now the story can grow quieter still. Let the great chambers dim. Let the inscriptions soften into unreadable lines of light. Let the corridors lengthen, then slow, then fade. Let the ancient world become only a gentle outline in the dark. There is nothing more that needs to be held tightly. The Forerunners can remain as they are, vast, distant, precise, and calm. Sleep may come like a final archive closing softly in its frame. Sleep may come like dust settling over a sealed floor. Sleep may come like the faint glow on a long unused panel, steady and untroubled. There is room enough for it here. The ancient ruins do not ask for attention anymore. They simply persist, and in their persistence there is a kind of peace. So rest now with the quiet civilizations of Halo drifting at the edge of thought. Rest with their arches, their rings, their halls, and their patient lights. Rest with their unanswered questions, their preserved traces, and their old, elegant silence. The night is wide enough to hold them, and wide enough to hold you too. Beyond that final quiet, one may imagine that the oldest Forerunner structures were not always ruins. Long before they became the pale skeletons of memory, they were lived-in places of exact purpose, filled with the soft persistence of routine. There would have been maintenance paths polished by use, hidden service shafts carrying the constant murmur of systems beneath the visible grandeur, and chambers where one form of labor passed peacefully into another. A civilization as ancient and ordered as this would not have depended only on monumental gestures. It would have depended on repeated small acts, on calibrations, on preservation, on the endless and almost invisible work of keeping a vast world in balance. That thought is gentle in its own way. It suggests that even among beings who could shape ringworlds and construct star-spanning architectures, the life of a civilization still included habit. There were still rhythms. There were still mornings of a kind, even if those mornings were measured not by sunlight, but by the gradual waking of systems across immense distances. Perhaps some inner lights brightened in sequence along a corridor as a structure came online. Perhaps quiet fields hummed awake beneath floors of smooth stone. Perhaps gardens no visitor now remembers were open to thin artificial dawns, and something like dew gathered on carefully tended leaves. It is easy to think of ancient empires as loud, but the greater part of any empire may always have been quiet, and the Forerunners in the halo imagination feel especially made for this sort of reflection because their works are so often seen after the fact. A city in use explains itself one way. A city abandoned explains itself another. The same wall that once framed a practical route becomes, in ruins, a symbol of vanished intention. The same staircase that once carried daily traffic becomes a slender line of elegance leading nowhere. The same chamber that once served a defined purpose becomes an empty vessel for the question of what it was for. This is one of the soft sorrows of archaeology. Whether real or fictional, the objects remain but the context thins. Yet in that thinning a different beauty appears. The mind is invited to wander where certainty once stood. In real history, this is often how ancient civilizations come to feel larger than life. We do not know every custom, every argument, every ordinary meal. We have fragments. We have pottery, foundations, tablets, broken statues, buried roads, half-erased inscriptions. From these, a world is reconstructed but not fully recovered. The lost always retain their distance. Halo takes that historical distance and stretches it into mythic scale. Its forerunners are not merely an old people. They are an old horizon. They are the civilization behind the current age, a presence so ancient that its traces are woven into the very understanding of the present. That layering is part of the quiet fascination. The human covenant war, the present struggles of the galaxy, the immediate drama of survival, all of it sits above a deeper sediment of time. Beneath the known conflicts lie older inheritances, older decisions, older absences. The Forerunners are not simply gone in a simple sense. Their departure is a condition that continues to shape everything after them. Their artifacts are not neutral objects. Their systems do not merely exist. They still influence the texture of the world. In stories, this creates a feeling that history is not a line but a strata, and that every age sleeps atop previous ages like layers of stone and ash. The ring itself is a marvelous expression of that idea. It is at once monumental and hidden. From a distance, it can appear almost pure in shape, as if it were a thought-given material form. But up close, the ring world becomes something more intimate and strange. It is a habitat, an archive, a landscape, a machine. It holds forests and seas, cliffs and plains, weather and shadow, all within a construction so vast that its curve is difficult to apprehend at once. To stand upon such a structure would be to feel both grounded and unmoored. The horizon itself would carry the memory that one is walking on an artifact. There is something calming in that paradox. The ancient world is not only a place of broken empires and vanished names, it is also a place of continuance. On a ring, dawn can arrive with ceremonial slowness. Lakes can lie still under unfamiliar skies. Birds, if any are present, might cross a light that seems natural until one remembers it is enclosed by design. The weather itself becomes a form of architecture. Clouds move under rules set by a mind long departed. Rain falls with the precision of a system that has not forgotten how to behave, even if its makers are dust. Such a world feels old in a way that is almost tender. It has been arranged to endure, and endurance in the language of ancient civilizations is often its own form of art. A tomb is an act of endurance. A temple is an act of endurance. A written language pressed into stone is an act of endurance. A ring world spanning impossible distances is endurance made cosmic. Yet endurance is not the same as immortality. Even the most carefully preserved forms alter with time. Surfaces weather, systems fail, memory becomes interpretation. The beauty of ruins lies in this very imbalance. They remind us that creation is not defeated by time, but transformed by it. The original function recedes and the outline of intention remains. When one imagines walking among Forerunner ruins at night, the experience is almost domestic in its quietness. One might find a long hall with a polished floor reflecting a dim ceiling. One might pass columns that do not quite touch the eye with decoration, but instead with proportion. One might notice that the geometry is not harsh, despite its precision. It is exact, but not cold. It has the reserved grace of a civilization that believed in order as a form of beauty. Even the emptiness within such spaces feels curated. Silence seems to belong there. It does not intrude. It is invited. This is perhaps why the ancient halo civilizations feel so suited to bedtime reverie. They invite the mind to move slowly and to trust scale without needing to master it. One can think of their vast networks, their buried histories, their long-vanished debates, and yet the thought does not need to sharpen into urgency. Instead, it can settle into a gentle fascination. There is no need to solve the mystery tonight. The mystery may remain restful precisely because it remains open. A sealed door in the dark can be more comforting than an answered question because it preserves the possibility of wonder without demanding attention. If one lingers with the fiction a little longer, one can imagine other Forerunner places that never appear in full, but seem to exist just beyond the edge of the visible story. Quiet observatories on high plateaus. Archives whose walls were lined with data so old that even their categories have become opaque. Transit chambers where travelers once waited beneath transparent panels showing slow-moving stars. Inland seas bordered by white stone embankments. Gardens designed not for ornament alone, but to tune the mood of those who walked through them. In such places, civilization would have been not merely impressive, but intimate. Even the grandest scale might have been experienced in the cadence of personal passage. There is an old and pleasant human habit of imagining the people of a vanished civilization as either noble or severe, but the truth is usually softer and more difficult. They would have been ordinary to themselves. They would have lived within expectations, routines, anxieties, and preferences. Some would have admired architecture. Some would have favored music or mathematics. Some would have argued over method and hierarchy. Some would have been patient, others impatient, some devoted to preservation, and some to innovation. The scale of their works should not make them unreal. The most convincing ancient civilizations are those that feel as though they contained every weather of the mind. Halo's Forerunners, though filtered through myth and revelation, carry enough texture to suggest that complexity. They were not just makers, they were inheritors and interpreters. They had predecessors in the story of the galaxy and successors in the form of those who discovered their remains. Their history is one of succession and burden. A civilization becomes more haunting when it is known that it did not appear from nothing, nor vanish without consequence. It occupied a long chain of time. It thought of itself as continuing something, even if that something now lies beyond recovery. That is true of so many real civilizations too. They are never as isolated as the ruins make them seem. And ruins, of course, are always selective. What survives is not what mattered most in daily life, but what could survive. Stone, metal, sealed chambers, broken pylons, archived fragments. In the real world, climate and accident determine what can be found. In fiction, design and narrative do the same. So we meet the Forerunners through what remains available to us: monumental corridors, luminous glyphs, geometric relics, ring structures immense enough to redefine imagination. It is a beautiful method of partial revelation. The civilization is introduced not by biography, but by atmosphere. Atmosphere matters because it gives the mind room to breathe. A room full of explanation can feel smaller than a room full of suggestion. The ancient Halo world does not insist on total clarity. It lets shadows remain. It lets the exact purpose of certain machines drift just beyond reach. It allows even a simple room to seem layered with prior significance. Was this a council chamber, a navigational node, a place of ceremonial quiet, a memory vault, or all of these in different ages. The uncertainty is not a flaw. It is part of the living texture of the law. Ancient places often become many things over time, and that multiplicity makes them feel more true. One can imagine, too, the deep patience required to build a ring world in the first place. Whatever the practical steps, whatever the astronomical measures and material sciences and generations of planning, the very concept suggests a civilization that thought in scales most species could scarcely hold in mind. That kind of thinking has a peculiar serenity to it. It implies confidence in continuity, or perhaps an urgency so disciplined that it appears serene from the outside. Great projects are always partly about the future. They are acts of trust performed across unknown spans. Someone lays a foundation intending for those they will never meet to stand upon it. The tragedy, if one can call it that, is that the future rarely arrives as expected. Systems are inherited by new hands. Languages change. Functions are forgotten. A pathway built for one pilgrimage becomes a maintenance corridor for another age, then a ruin visited only by dust. Yet there is no need to despair in this. The transformation is not failure in a simple sense. It is the natural weather of time. The Forerunners, like all ancient builders in myth and history, become legible to later minds through what later minds need. Their silence is edited by the questions of those who come after, so the night can hold them gently. The ring can continue its slow, silent rotation in the imagination. The long light arcs across ancient landforms. The old stone and metal retain their elegant restraint. In some far chamber, one might imagine a dormant system still keeping a tiny vigil, a status light that has not changed in centuries, a soft pulse indicating not life exactly, but persistence. Such details matter because they are small. The grandest civilizations are often loved most tenderly through their smallest survivals. A cracked threshold can suggest 1,000 footsteps. A suspended bridge can suggest 1,000 crossings. A sealed archive door can suggest 1,000 unread records. A weathered insignia can suggest 1,000 acts of loyalty, administration, memory, and ritual. These are the faint human pleasures of ancient world stories. Not only what happened, but what might have been routine. The ordinary in lost civilizations acquires a shimmer of reverence because it is no longer accessible. Every utensil becomes a clue. Every room becomes a sentence in a language we are still learning to feel. The fiction of the Forerunners also carries a quiet melancholy about stewardship. They appear in many interpretations not merely as rulers, but as custodians of immense responsibility. Their world is less a throne than a charge. To preserve a galaxy-wide balance, to manage systems that outlive generations, to maintain archives of species and knowledge, these are acts that require a kind of solemnity. One can imagine councils held in high chambers where decisions were made not for the season, but for epochs. The weight of such responsibility would alter the tone of a civilization. It would teach its architecture to be severe in outline and calm in spirit. Even beauty would be restrained, as if ornament were a distraction from duty. And yet, despite the duty, there remains in the halo presentation a sense of elegance. Not elegance in the sense of luxury, but elegance in the sense of exactness married to grace. Curves that seem inevitable, joints hidden from sight, surfaces that catch light in measured ways, spaces that guide motion without shouting. A culture that built such things may have believed, consciously or not, that order itself could be a form of comfort. That belief is soothing to imagine. It implies that the ancient makers did not merely solve problems, they shaped environments in which minds could rest. If one continues to wander in thought, the ring world begins to feel like a layered museum with no central curator remaining. Some galleries are inhabited by wind and weather, some are sealed, some are half open to the stars. Some contain only traces, not exhibits, and yet all of it is connected by a design that still functions. That is one of the stranger and lovelier features of fictional ancient civilizations. They can be simultaneously dead and active. A machine can continue long after its maker is gone. A habitat can persist after its civilization has collapsed. In this way, the Forerunner world is not a tomb alone. It is an afterlife of infrastructure. Infrastructure is not usually romantic, and yet in the context of antiquity it becomes almost devotional. Roads, channels, gates, transit systems, control nodes, data vessels, all of these are the bones of a society. They are what allow movement, exchange, memory, and authority to exist at scale. To discover such things in ruin is to find the skeleton of an intention. Halo magnifies this into cosmic architecture. The roads are among the stars. The gates can span worlds. The systems are vast enough to become metaphysical, but the feeling remains the same. A civilization has left behind the pathways it once used to reach itself. There is comfort in knowing that not everything ancient has been perfectly mapped. Mystery is a soft companion to sleep. The unanswered question about what happened here, who stood there, what was intended by this structure, why certain choices were made, all of that opens a gentle space in the mind. It allows us to contemplate without strain. The unknowable is not always frightening. Sometimes it is simply vast, and vastness, when approached slowly, can be restful. One breath, then another. One corridor, then another. One old name, then another, receding into the dim. The mythology around the Forerunners also deepens this restful quality. Myth does not contradict history here, it hovers beside it. The ancient builders become almost divine in later interpretation, not because they are worshipped exactly, but because their works exceed ordinary experience. This is true in real cultures as well. A sufficiently old monument begins to gather legends around itself. A ruined city becomes a place where gods may have walked, or where kings may have vanished, or where a forbidden knowledge may still sleep. Fiction merely gives this ancient human instinct a wider stage. The result is an atmosphere of reverent uncertainty. So if the mind returns, as it may, to a solitary figure moving through such a place, that figure need not be heroic in any loud sense. They may simply be listening, a soft footfall, a pause before a glowing surface, a hand resting near a wall etched with faded forms. The act of moving through old places is already a kind of dialogue. The traveler asks nothing too sharply. The ruin answers nothing too quickly. Between them there is patience. That patience is one of the most soothing gifts of ancient world storytelling. Perhaps somewhere in an unvisited sector of the ring, there remains a chamber no modern being has fully interpreted. Its ceiling could be high enough to disappear into dark. Its floor could be patterned with delicate, recurring lines. Its center could hold a structure that was once ceremonial, scientific, or administrative, though now the categories blur. Perhaps a soft light still runs along a border seam, not bright enough to wake the room, only enough to remind it of its own design. Places like that exist in the imagination as resting points. They are not puzzles to solve before sleep. They are spaces to dwell in briefly, then leave undisturbed. The quiet fascination of Halo's ancient civilizations also lies in their relationship to scale. A lesser world might show us ruins that belong to a people. Halo shows us ruins that belong to a species-level project. Entire histories are implied by the architecture alone. That can be humbling, but not in a severe way. It can feel like standing inside a thought too large to complete. One does not need to complete it. One only needs to notice that thought can become landscape, that intention can become habitat, and that even the fragments of such a habitat can remain beautiful long after the original mind has gone silent. And in that silence, the old melancholy of all lost civilizations becomes almost peaceful. The world was once busy with its own certainty, then ages passed, then names thinned, then only the large shapes remained. This is not unique to fiction. It echoes every real excavation, every museum label, every careful reconstruction from bone, brick, and ash. The difference is that Halo lets that echo ring across the galaxy. The result is less a history lesson than a meditation on what it means to be followed by time. There is a soft dignity in being remembered only by fragments. A complete account can be useful, but a fragment can be beautiful. It asks more of the imagination. It leaves room for tenderness. When we look at an ancient wall, a broken arch, a surviving inscription, we are already participating in a form of translation. We offer continuity where there is discontinuity. We make a small bridge from the present into the vanished past. The Forerunner world, with all its luminous remnants, invites this act again and again. It says, in effect, that the distance may never close, but it can be crossed gently. So let the ancient pathways remain open only in thought. Let the vaulted chambers remain patient. Let the silent machines continue their low, even hum beneath the imagination, not urgent, not demanding, only present. Let the ring world glow faintly under an artificial sky whose origins are almost too old to name. Let the ruins keep their order. Let the lost civilization keep its mystery. And let the mind, having wandered among these quiet immensities, begin at last to rest. There is no need to search further tonight. No need to force the old archives open. No need to ask the dark to explain itself. The Forerunner world has offered enough. Its arches, its terraces, its gardens of stone and light, its sealed knowledge, its enduring designs, its strange, solemn grace. That is more than enough to carry us towards sleep. So remain here for a little while in the hush after the great ages. Stay with the distant ring, the forgotten halls, the patient ruins. Stay with the feeling that somewhere, beyond the reach of waking thought, an ancient civilization continues to exist as form, as atmosphere, as memory in the dark. And as that thought grows softer and softer still, may it become only a calm presence at the edge of dreaming, where the old world turns quietly and nothing asks to be awakened anymore. And yet, even after that gentle pause, the mind may still drift a little farther through the old places, as if walking slowly across a floor made smooth by time. There is something especially soothing about imagined archaeology because it lets us look without urgency. We do not have to uncover every layer. We can simply notice the layering itself. A fallen panel, a corridor half swallowed by vines of light, a chamber whose purpose has been forgotten but whose proportions still feel deliberate, all of these can be held in the mind like small lanterns. They do not need to shine brightly. They only need to be there, steady and calm. The Forerunner world, in this quiet way, feels less like a setting and more like a memory that refuses to disappear. It lingers in surfaces. It lingers in the way a doorway is framed, in the arc of a bridge, in the patient geometry of stairs that seem built less for speed than for ritual. Ancient civilizations often reveal themselves through repetition, through the habits of their design. They return to certain curves, certain alignments, certain materials, as if trying to teach their own people how to move through space with reverence. The Forerunners in the imagination seem to have understood this deeply. Their spaces are often not merely functional. They are ceremonial in the quietest sense. Even a path can feel like an invitation to slow down. And perhaps that is why ruins move us so easily at bedtime. During the day, we may want explanations, maps, diagrams, dates, and names. At night, we are more willing to let an unknown corridor remain unknown. We can admire a structure without solving it. We can accept that a chamber may have held archives or observatories or rites whose meanings are now beyond recovery. This uncertainty does not feel frustrating in the dark. It feels kind. It gives the imagination somewhere soft to rest. There is also a particular beauty in the idea of a civilization that outlived itself in pieces. Not all endurance is loud. Some of it is hidden in foundations, or in the routines of machines left on standby, or in systems that continue to function long after the hands that made them are gone. Real ancient cities often leave behind traces of such persistence. A road still follows an older line. A well remains usable. A wall is reused, then repaired, then absorbed into a newer structure. History layers itself quietly. Halo's ancient worlds echo that pattern on a grander scale. The difference is only in the size of the stones. One can imagine a Forerunner city at the edge of a vast plain. its towers pale against the dim sky, its surfaces reflecting an internal glow that feels less like electricity and more like remembered daylight. There may have been open plazas where scholars crossed in measured silence. There may have been long elevated walkways linking archives to living quarters, observatories to sanctuaries, gardens to transit nodes. Perhaps water moved through the city in hidden channels, not as decoration alone, but as part of a larger philosophy, a belief that life and order should remain visibly connected. Perhaps the city was arranged in rings or tiers or branching limbs of architecture that mirrored some cosmic model. Ancient builders often believed that a city should reflect the universe, and in fiction as in history, that idea can leave behind breathtaking forms. The formlessness of time changes these places in the same way it changes any ruin. Edges soften, surfaces weather, leaves gather in corners, dust collects in seams where no hand has passed in ages, yet the original intention still seems to live there, quietly resisting collapse. We often think of ruin as a kind of failure, but that is not always how it feels when we stand before old stone. Sometimes ruin is simply another phase of existence. The building becomes less a container of activity and more a vessel of atmosphere. It holds silence now, and silence can be a kind of use. In the world of Halo, the Forerunners are often remembered through monuments that suggest a civilization both immensely advanced and deeply ceremonial. That combination is especially compelling because it resists a simple notion of progress. We are not looking at a people who became elegant by becoming less human, or less emotional, or less spiritual. We are looking at the possibility that immense technological sophistication may still be shaped by grief, devotion, hierarchy, myth, and memory. Ancient history often teaches this to us as well. The more elaborate a civilization becomes, the more it may formalize its longing. Temples grow larger. Records grow more exact. Tombs become more intricate. Art begins to carry the weight of statecraft, and statecraft begins to borrow the language of art. Perhaps that is why the ruins feel so layered. They are not just the remains of a machine culture. They feel like the remains of a worldview. A worldview leaves behind more than tools. It leaves behind posture. It leaves behind the shapes of rooms and the distance between pillars and the way light is allowed to enter. It leaves behind assumptions about what deserves to be central and what may remain hidden. The Forerunner world, in its fictional antiquity, seems to have organized itself around such assumptions with almost religious care. Even in ruin, those assumptions continue to speak softly. It is pleasant, too, to imagine the quiet edges of that civilization rather than only its grand centers. A remote research outpost on a moon, where the windows look out onto a slow, distant planetary curve. A maintenance hall beneath a city, where machines hum in a rhythm so low it becomes almost part of breathing. A way station in a desert of ash or glass, with a single intact chamber and a dozen collapsed passages leading nowhere. A shore where old docking platforms still extend into dark water, their surfaces freckled with mineral deposits. These smaller places are often the most tender in the mind because they suggest ordinary life inside a legendary age. Not everything must be monumental. Some people once drank from cups, walked narrow corridors, and looked through ordinary windows at ordinary weather, even in a civilization built on astonishing scale. And then there are the artifacts, those quiet survivors that seem to carry more time than their size should allow. A disc with a smooth edge and inscrutable inlays. A tablet whose symbols are not exactly decorative and not exactly mathematical. A shard of alloy that still holds light in its surface. In a bedtime narration, such objects can be treated not as clues to a mystery show, but as small resting facts of the world. They existed, they mattered, they passed from hand to hand. They were once familiar to someone, that is enough. We do not need to force them into explanation. Their presence is its own meaning. It is interesting how often ancient civilizations in fiction become mirrors for our own questions about continuity. We wonder what survives us. We wonder whether our roads, our libraries, our data, our language, our habits will mean anything when seen from far enough away. The Forerunners embody this wonder in a particularly elegant form because their civilization is so large that it already feels archaeological while still alive in memory. Their remains are not just old, they are conceptually old. They belong to a depth of time that encourages humility. And humility, when the world is quiet, can feel restful rather than small. There is also a kind of companionship in these ruins. Not a living companionship, of course, but a companionship of shared solitude. The mind moving through them is alone, yet not lonely. The ancient halls seem to understand that all civilizations, no matter how bright, are temporary arrangements against the dark. That truth need not be sad. It can be comforting. It reminds us that our own rooms, our own towns, our own small histories are part of the same long pattern. Every age builds as if permanence were possible. Every age eventually becomes a layer beneath another age. The Forerunner world simply makes that pattern visible on a vast and beautiful scale. If one were to wander in thought through a Forerunner archive, the experience might be less like reading and more like listening. The air could feel cool and dry. The walls might be smooth enough to reflect faint ambient light. Long shelves or storage columns may rise into dimness, each holding records whose contents are now inaccessible, yet whose order still suggests care. Perhaps the archive was arranged by stars, or by subjects, or by the phases of some ancient philosophical system. Perhaps there were chambers for sacred history, chambers for scientific data, chambers for civic memory, chambers for personal records, and chambers sealed even from their own custodians. Such distinctions often matter deeply to the people who create them, and then matter differently, centuries later, to those who rediscover them. There is a special calm in that rediscovery. It is not the excitement of an answer arriving. It is the steadier feeling that one has been allowed near a closed room and has been trusted not to rush. Ancient things often seem to ask for that kind of trust. They do not reveal themselves all at once. They suggest. They permit. They remain partially hidden. In this way, they resemble dreams, which also offer symbols without immediate translation. Perhaps that is why fictional ruins are so suited to bedtime. They let the mind continue its gentle work without demanding completion. The Forerunner aesthetic, with its luminous whites, pale metals, dark voids, and precise forms, often creates a curious emotional balance. It can feel both cold and reverent, both minimal and immense. This balance is part of its sleep-friendly beauty. The spaces are not crowded. They do not shout. Even when they are enormous, they often seem proportioned to contemplation. A bridge across a chasm may be wide enough for ceremonies rather than traffic. A central chamber may be open to the sky, or to stars, with only a few structural ribs holding the space in elegant suspension. Such architecture is not merely a place to move through. It is a way of slowing the pulse. In imagining these places, one may also imagine the people who once inhabited them, though only as soft silhouettes. Scholars carrying thin illuminated panels, builders moving along catwalks at dawn, priests or custodians maintaining the quiet order of sanctuaries, children learning the names of distant structures and ancient constellations, engineers tending systems so old that their origins had already become legend. Each life would have been brief beside the scale of the civilization, and yet each would have mattered locally, intimately, in the way all lives do. Lost civilizations often become abstract when described broadly, but in the quiet mind, they regain their human texture. There may have been songs in those cities too, though perhaps not songs in the familiar sense. Maybe there were tonal sequences used in ritual. Maybe there were harmonic diagnostics sung to test the resonance of chambers. Maybe public festivals filled the plazas with layered sound that rose into the architecture and then faded into the night. It is easy to forget, when looking at ruins, that they were once full of voices. The silence we see now is only the last shape those voices made in time. This thought can be gentle, especially before sleep, because it implies continuity. Nothing is ever only empty. Every silence was once occupied. Across the Halo mythos, the Forerunner past often feels like a deep current beneath the main story. It is not always visible, but it shapes everything above it. This is another reason the subject lends itself so well to bedtime reflection. A hidden foundation is calmer than a surface event. It suggests that beneath conflict there is structure, and beneath structure there is older intention, and beneath that perhaps still older sorrow or wonder. Ancient civilizations in fiction often carry the emotional residue of what came after them. The Forerunners in particular seem to embody a grand and tragic responsibility. Their works persist because their choices were immense. Their remnants are peaceful because the ages that followed have had time to absorb the shock. We may think of the ringworld itself as one of the most serene expressions of that persistence. A ring is a simple shape, almost tender in its mathematics. It closes on itself. It suggests cycles, return, enclosure, and continuity. To live beneath one would be to live under a horizon that has been shaped by design. To wander its surfaces would be to move through a world that is both landscape and artifact. Forests, lakes, plains, and ruins would all exist inside an engineered sky, and this layered reality would give every view a sense of thoughtful distance. Even the stars, if visible, would seem to have been arranged with exceptional patience. There is a special sort of melancholy in structures built to outlast the people who made them. Modern life often tries to be efficient and immediate, but ancient civilizations thought in spans of generations. They built for heirs they would never meet. They laid stone for descendants whose names were unknowable. This act of faith is visible everywhere in historical ruins. It is visible in temples cut into cliffs, in roads crossing impossible terrain, in tombs that were sealed with ceremony, in clocks and calendars aligned to heavens that would still be moving long after their makers had vanished. The Forerunner world magnifies that same faith into science fiction scale. Its monuments are both practical and prophetic. They assume a future and then become the past. Sometimes a ruin seems especially quiet because it was once part of daily routine. A gate, for instance, is not glamorous. It is simply a threshold. Yet if a gate stands for 10,000 years after the traffic has ceased, it acquires a strange dignity. It becomes an emblem of passage with no one left to pass through. A stair becomes a sculpture of ascent. A corridor becomes a line of memory. A plaza becomes a held breath. The Forerunner spaces, in this sense, are not only ruins of a high civilization, they are ruins of usage. They remind us that even the most extraordinary systems were once ordinary to someone. This is perhaps the quietest mystery of all, how quickly the extraordinary becomes familiar, and how eventually the familiar becomes antique. Every civilization lives inside its own normality. It cannot always see the future ruin of its buildings any more than we can see our own cities as archaeologists might someday see them. Fiction allows us to step sideways into that perspective. The Forerunners are far enough away to feel almost mythic, yet close enough in form to seem like a possible future remembered as a past. That double distance makes them restful. They are not exactly us, and yet they are legible enough to invite tenderness. And so the imagination continues its slow walk through those quiet remains. It passes a chamber with a ceiling like a pale sky. It passes a balcony overlooking an expanse of broken terraces. It passes a garden where geometric planters still hold dust and pale mineral growth. It passes a hall with inscriptions that may have once been read aloud during ceremonies now lost to time. It passes a sealed door and does not press it open. It passes a staircase descending into a lower level where the air would be cooler, older, and stiller. Nothing needs to happen. The act of passing is enough. There is a lovely sadness in the idea that a civilization can become most vivid only after it has ended. While alive, it was just life. It was administration, whether meals, maintenance, disagreements, scheduling, repair. Only later does it acquire the glow of legend. The Forerunner civilization in Halo feels like that kind of legend, made of immense accomplishments and immeasurable absence. Its world is haunted not by ghosts in a frightening sense, but by scale. Everywhere there is evidence of capacity beyond current comprehension. That can be unsettling if one is awake and searching, but if one is tired and listening, it can feel like being near a sleeping giant who has long since become part of the landscape. The ancient histories we cherish often share this shape. We do not know every name, we do not know every motive, we do not know the full chain of events, but we know enough to sense a long, complex life behind the ruins. We know enough to feel the weight of the missing pieces. That is why myths endure. They preserve emotional truth where detail has eroded. The Forerunners, though fictional, operate in that same register. They are remembered through fragments of design, through remaining mechanisms, through monumental spaces that imply lost continuity. Their absence becomes a kind of presence. If one were to sit quietly in a chamber of their making, perhaps the most noticeable thing would be the stillness of the air. Ancient spaces often have a way of seeming to contain their own weather. They keep cool in heat, hush sound at the edges, and create an atmosphere where time feels less linear. Many old ruins do this in the real world as well. A crypt, a temple, a collapsed amphitheater, a buried street under a modern city, each changes the listener's sense of scale. The noise of the present recedes. The old place speaks softly beneath it. This is a good feeling for bedtime because it invites the body to do the same, to quiet, to lower, to drift. And then there is the quiet wonder of imagining what knowledge was once stored in those places. Not only sciences, but star charts, genealogies, treaties, prayers, maps of hidden routes, records of migrations, accounts of failures, lists of names, and perhaps philosophies so old that they had already become ritual before the civilization ended. Ancient libraries in fiction can feel especially moving because they represent an effort to hold the world still through memory. The Forerunner archives may have contained not just information, but a civilization's attempt to remain coherent across vast time. That effort, even when imperfect, is touching. It tells us that remembering was once considered a sacred duty. The thought of sacred duty can also be calm when held gently. Not obligation in a harsh sense, but care extended across time. Someone built, someone maintained, someone recorded, someone sealed the chamber carefully, someone returned the artifact to its place. Someone knew that the world would change and still acted as if continuity mattered. This is one of the oldest human impulses, and perhaps one of the most beautiful. It appears in burial rites, in archives, in restoration work, in family heirlooms, in the tending of grave, in the preservation of songs. Halo's ancient world amplifies this impulse until it becomes cosmic. The result is not cold grandeur alone, but devotion enlarged by distance. A night narration can linger with that devotion without pressing it into drama. It can simply note that ancient civilizations are often remembered not for convenience, but for the care they took in shaping meaning. The Forerunners seem to have made meaning into infrastructure. Their pathways may have been aligned to astronomical events. Their chambers may have encoded belief. Their monuments may have been both record and prayer. In such a world, even a simple wall could be read as an act of intention. Even the placement of stone could be a sentence in a larger, silent language. And when the imagination grows tired of interpretation, it may rest instead on texture. Smooth metal warmed by distant light. Fine dust settled in a groove. A shallow pool reflecting a ceiling that no longer has a name. The faint echo of footsteps in an empty hall. The scent of cold stone, or the imagined scent of old rain gathering in an interior courtyard. These sensory details do not need to explain the world. They only need to make it feel inhabited by memory. That feeling can settle the mind more gently than any conclusion. So the old world remains, its ruins remain, its hidden chambers remain, its unfinished questions remain in peaceful suspension. The ring turns with no hurry. The cities sleep beneath their own light. The archives wait behind sealed thresholds. The gardens, if there were gardens, continue their patient arrangement of silence and geometry. Somewhere beyond the reach of waking hours, the civilization that once made all this stands not as a warning, not as a victory, but as a deep historical hush. And in that hush, there is room for us to breathe more slowly. There is room for the mind to stop reaching. There is room for the day to loosen its grip and become less distinct. We may imagine one last path through the ruins, perhaps along a raised bridge where the view opens to distant domes and broken towers, or perhaps through a sheltered courtyard where light falls in a soft square upon the floor. We may notice how beautiful the old forms remain even in decay. We may notice how little they ask of us. We may notice that they are content simply to be remembered. That is enough for tonight. The ancient halo civilizations can keep their quiet mysteries. The Forerunner world can keep its solemn geometry. The ruins can continue their patient conversation with time. We can let them fade a little, not into oblivion, but into the kind of darkness that is kind enough to hold memory without strain. The old structures remain where they are. The old stories remain where they are. And now the listener too may remain at rest, held gently between the last light of thought and the first soft shore of sleep.